Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Linux and Open Source News Show. In this episode, we've got the GNOME Foundation running into some monetary problems and having to scale back the amount of support that they can actually give the GNOME project. We also have the releases of Plasma 6.2 and Ubuntu 24.10, and we have some really solid progress being made on NVK, the open source Vulkan driver for Nvidia GPUs, but also on the official Nvidia GPUs and on drivers for Apple Silicon Macs. And we also have this message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Brilliant, a unique online learning platform that lets you learn by actually doing. You don't just have lectures and courses, you have interactive lessons in a lot of domains like math, development, data analysis, AI, and more. All the content on Brilliant is created by teachers, researchers, and professionals from well-known universities and companies like MIT, Caltech, or Google. The other key difference with other online learning platforms is the hands-on approach. You have problems to solve with each lesson, and that method has been proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos alone. As per what you will find on Brilliant, they have lessons on data analysis and statistics, on AI and large language models, but more importantly for you, at least if you're watching my stuff, that's probably something that interests you, and that's how to code. That's something I've wanted to get back into for a long while, and Brilliant has a course on Python that I started taking to get the basics right. It's full of exercises that teach by example, and it really cemented how much I need to learn and how much I forgot in the past 15 years. So if you want to learn something new and you want to get started with Brilliant for free for 30 days, you can use the link that appears down there or that is in the description, brilliant.org/thelinuxexp. You'll also get 20% off your annual subscription. So click that and take a look at Brilliant. So let's begin with GNOME. It looks like the GNOME Foundation is having some monetary problems. Contrary to KDE, which has overspent on purpose to get rid of their large cash reserves, the GNOME Foundation unfortunately had to reduce their staff to save some money. Their creative director and their director of community development were both let go. And there will also be reductions in the spending that the GNOME Foundation does on the community side of things, on the board itself, and on travel from board members to various events. The GNOME Foundation will also reassess where they actually need to go in terms of events, and where it really doesn't matter and where they shouldn't be spending any money to go to. Going forward, the GNOME Foundation will also rely more on the community for event organization and representation, for marketing GNOME, for fundraising, and for graphic design. This all sounds less than ideal because the very purpose of the foundation is to raise money for the GNOME project and to market the GNOME project and to organize the community and the events around it. If it's up to the community to do this and the board can't do it anymore, then what purpose does the GNOME Foundation serve exactly? Now, unaffected projects for the GNOME Foundation are the usual GNOME internships, the key events like GWADEC, and other sponsored projects that were paid for by various organizations, like the Sovereign Tech Fund projects or the work that they're doing on FlatHub that is sponsored by Endless. The reason why this happened, though, is apparently because it's very tricky to raise funds for non-profits right now, and this I can very well believe. People don't have that much money. Companies prefer investing in stuff that will generate them some money instead of non-profits, so not too surprised. Still, the foundation seems committed to transparency, trying to do things in the open and talk about these budget problems, which is a nice change, because while the foundation is still looking for a new executive director and they want to keep operating, it's never really been the most transparent or logical or clear organization out there. Plenty of criticisms, constructive or not, were dismissed and disappeared into thin air once they reached the GNOME Foundation. They've never been that well respected by people. They fired board members without explanation to the community. There was a lot of stuff that people were really unhappy about with the GNOME Foundation, and I think them now relying more on the community also shows that maybe the foundation wasn't run super well. Not a great place to be in right now for GNOME. Now, Plasma 6.2 was released this week, and as usual, I made a video about the major things that were in there. I missed a few smaller details in the video, but the thing is already like 20 minutes long, so go watch it on YouTube or on PeerTube. It's on tillvids.com. If you just want the TLDR, then Plasma 6.2 is a small-ish release in terms of the big features that it ships, but it's a big release if you count the sheer number of changes. It comes with a lot of improvements for digital artists, with drawing tablets and pens being much better supported. It lets you map the buttons of these pens to different mouse clicks. It lets you calibrate drawing tablets more easily or set up the drawing tablet to be the same space as your screen. There's also improvements to power management with a better battery and power profile indicator. You can now tell applications to stop preventing your PC from going to sleep or from locking the screen. This is something that web browsers playing videos or that Steam could do, and that could result in security problems or on some lost battery life, or your computer just not going to sleep at all when you slotted it in your bag because you had Chrome with a video pause. Visually, accent colors are now properly applied to all Breeze Plasma themes, including the Breeze Dark or the Breeze Twilight theme. The app menu moved to symbolic icons instead of full color ones, and the Widget Explorer, the thing that appears to let you add widgets to your desktop or your panel, it now tells you which widgets have been recently installed, and it places them at the top of the list so they're easier to find and add to the various places where you want them. Other changes include the color management protocol being enabled by default on Wayland. Discover now lets you apply your updates and shut down instead of just having to apply the updates and reboot. And accessibility settings have been tweaked. They now include color blindness filters, and there are plenty of smaller changes here and there. Now, it is not a game changer for Plasma users. It will not make you switch to Plasma if you didn't like Plasma before, but it is a very nice quality of life improvement that will have something for virtually every single Plasma user out there. Now, depending on your distro, you will get it or not in a timely fashion or not at all. Now, this week we also saw the release of Ubuntu 24.10. It's the Ubuntu 20th anniversary release because Ubuntu is now 20 years old, and so it has a nice buttload of nostalgia, like the Ubuntu 4.10 startup sound that has been added, a new warty brown accent color that you can pick. You have some anniversary wallpapers and 4.10 inspired wallpapers as well, which is nice. In terms of Ubuntu specific changes, you now get progress bars on the dock when you're updating a Snap app in the background instead of having the icon disappear then reappear when the app has been updated. The context menu on that dock has been improved as well with a few more legible elements. The App Center was improved. You can uninstall snaps from the Manage category of that application. If you're trying to update an app that is currently open, you'll see a banner telling you to close that application before you perform the update. There's also the new Security Center, which is a brand new application that lets you enable experimental permissions for snaps, meaning that every time you use a Snap app and it's trying to do something that its sandbox doesn't let it do, you will get a nice little pop-up where you can select what you actually want to let the application do, much like Flatpak permissions, but for Snap applications. Of course, in the future, this app will be much improved with firewall controls, Ubuntu Pro subscription settings, and more, and probably these experimental permissions will be revamped UX-wise and UI-wise, because currently they're not super intuitive. Ubuntu 24.10 also comes with GNOME 47, which means it has the accent colors from GNOME upstream. Ubuntu already had accent colors, obviously, but now it has the GNOME accent colors instead of their own. They should work with more applications, but in my testing, Snap apps tended to follow the thing. libadwaita apps followed the accent color, but KDE apps didn't. Dialogues were also revamped a little bit. They now have split buttons that look like macOS instead of half of the pop-up buttons. You also have hardware-encoded screen recordings. You've got a new sidebar inside of Nautilus with network emplacements being revamped, internal drives appearing in the sidebar. You don't have to click on that other locations little element. and Nautilus is also used as a file picker throughout GNOME now, which means that every single new thing that is added to Nautilus will also land onto the file picker, which is nice. In the settings, you can activate Windows on hover. You can also view the keyboard layouts that you have. Online accounts were much improved. And of course, under the hood, you've got apt 3.0, which is a much more legible terminal application. You've got the kernel 6.11, better fingerprint support, and Wayland is the default for everyone, including for Nvidia users. Finally, like, Nvidia drivers 550 or 560 are now good enough with Wayland that it can be the default, and you better get used to it, because, well, that's coming for everyone. Every distro will move to Wayland in the next 5 to 10 years tops. The sooner you get on board, the softer the fall will be, I guess. Still on drivers, Asahi Linux has now fixed the biggest gap in their default configuration, and that was the lack of solid graphics drivers, as in gaming-capable drivers. On Apple M1 computers, Asahi now has a game-playing toolkit that includes their brand new Vulkan 1.3 conformant drivers. It includes OpenCL 3.0 support, plus x86 emulation on top of that. You can install the entire package by just running dnf install steam on Fedora Asahi Remix, and you're done. You will get the whole package with Steam, with FEX for emulation from x86 to ARM, and you will also combine that with the Vulkan drivers that are now part of the Asahi package, whether using Asahi Linux or Fedora Asahi. So technically you should be able to run games, and potentially a lot more games than what you would actually be able to run using macOS on the exact same hardware. Of course, it is all experimental still. There are problems. Games are run in a VM for now because the page sizes between what Apple hardware uses and what x86 systems rely upon are completely different. But since game controllers and GPUs are passed through, there shouldn't be much performance difference between running that game in a VM or running it on bare metal. The real breakthrough came from the Vulkan drivers node, not from that VM, because these drivers gain support for the extensions that DXVK use to run DirectX games on Linux. And also, these drivers had to be twisted a little bit because Apple's hardware just doesn't have the hardware capabilities to do a lot of things that modern games expect, like tessellation or geometry shaders. Both of these things had to be re-implemented with weird workarounds in the drivers. DirectX 12 games aren't fully supported yet either, because some features just don't work yet, aren't supported yet, and as a whole, for DXVK or VKD3D games, the performance isn't the best. That's the next area of focus for this driver work. Now, as always, this is still absolutely insane work from the Asahi Linux developers. They managed to make more games run on Linux on Apple Silicon Macs than Apple ever did on their own operating system, even with all of their game porting toolkit efforts. And the Asahi team doesn't have access to any hardware documentation to write any of these drivers. So yeah, as always, Asahi developers just put Apple to shame. Now, still on the topic of drivers, NVK is also making solid progress to add a fully open source Vulkan driver for Nvidia GPUs. NVK is now Vulkan 1.3 conformant as well, and it supports all the required extensions to start playing some games through DXVK. They showcased Horizon Zero Dawn, Cyberpunk, Rust, Deep Rock Galactic, and a lot more. All of that NVK work is still done by Collabora mainly, and it still relies on the Nouveau kernel driver, not on the Nova driver that Red Hat is working on, because let's be honest, that Nova driver is still years away before it's usable. Now, since the GSP firmware that Nouveau needs to run properly with recent Nvidia GPUs, since that firmware is now included in the Linux firmware package that most distributions ship with, this is a combination that should work really well. NVK plus Nouveau plus that GSP firmware. A few things are still missing in there, especially for VKD3D support, so for DirectX 12 game support, namely ray tracing, mesh shaders, those aren't there yet, but the work is in progress. Zinc is also pretty much ready, Zinc being a way to give a GPU OpenGL support by using its Vulkan drivers instead. If the device doesn't have native OpenGL drivers, or if you just want to have a single driver do all of the work. And Zinc is currently implemented on top of NVK and might even be used as the default OpenGL driver by certain distributions. So that's really good news. It looks like that NVK driver is currently in about the same spot as the Asahi Linux Apple Silicon Vulkan driver, which is nice. I would expect both of these to be actually usable in day-to-day use, no longer completely experimental, before the end of next year, and I can't wait to be able to test this to see if the applications I need to run, namely DaVinci Resolve, would work with NVK instead of using the proprietary Nvidia drivers, and also just seeing the general performance of how games run, the battery life usage and things like that, just to see if it's better in some areas or if it just needs more years in development to even be a competing option to the proprietary Nvidia drivers. And speaking of those proprietary Nvidia drivers, but this time the official drivers, Nvidia gave a roadmap for their Wayland support. They said that they're increasing how much testing they're doing on Wayland, and they said that they want to add support for HDR using the new color management pipeline that Katie has started implementing and enabling in Plasma 6.2, but that other compositors are also looking at implementing. They also want to improve the Nvidia settings on Wayland, so it's no longer a completely useless application that does nothing when you don't run it on X11, and also to have not just read-only settings, which could be nice. They're also interested in working on fixing or improving dual GPU setups and hybrid GPU setups on Wayland with Nvidia GPUs, which is also very nice, at least it is for me. Now, they did hit some problems with Wayland though, like remote desktop use cases, for example to launch a fully remote session on a physical display, or doing automatic window resizing, window minimizing or maximizing. This is apparently not easy or not possible currently. Nvidia also encouraged compositor developers to use Vulkan instead of OpenGL, and they explained why they felt this was a much better fit. Which is fair, because Vulkan is a much newer, much better API than OpenGL, and on Linux it will quickly become the only real graphics API that everyone is using. So yeah, Nvidia is not the best actor out there for Linux drivers by a long shot, but at least they're conscious of the problem. They have sort of a roadmap, even though it's not really a roadmap because there are absolutely no time indications on anything that they want to implement, but at least we know that they know we need Wayland support, better Wayland support, and they're aware of the big things that we're working on the Linux desktop, and they're planning to support them, which is kinda nice. Very nice, like the devices from today's sponsor, Tuxedo computers. You all know about them by now. I've been talking about them at the end of my videos for more than 2 years, which shows how dedicated I am to showcasing their products. They're really good. They're computers that ship with Linux out of the box. Laptops, desktops, you decide. They have a wide range of devices. You can configure most of the components inside. You can have your own custom keyboard layout, your own logo laser etched on your laptop, and they will basically fit every price point and every need. And you know that their computers run Linux really well because that's the point of the entire thing. I only use their devices these days. My entire channel, my podcast, my videos, everything is run from one of their laptops, and all my gaming needs are served from one of their desktops. So if you need a new computer, you need to run Linux on it, and you want to support a company that actively contributes to Linux support for hardware, click the link in the description below and get yourself something from Tuxedo. They're really, really good. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, you have all the usual YouTube buttons underneath the video player. Please click them, comment, share, like, whatever else. You know how things work to make a channel grow on YouTube. And if you really enjoy what I do, you have plenty of links in the description of the video to support the channel, and you'll gain some pretty cool perks at that, starting from just $1 per month, which I don't think is that expensive for what you get. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I guess you will see me in the next one next week. Bye!